everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's Down and Dirty is getting a little more advanced with the breaker. So on our last video we covered just kind of some basics of how to pop a hole in the ground. But now I want to talk about what if we wanted to start a hole in a brand new slab for an excavator to be able to dig. How do you go about doing that? So we've saved ourselves some time here. We've already punched a bunch of holes in here. So now what I'm going to try to do is take this area right in here, and we're going to try to open this up right here so that Rick could get his bucket in there. So what we're going to do first of all is, it's always easier to do this around a joint because you've already got a natural break in the concrete. So we're going to go right here and we're going to pop ourselves another hole. Whoop. This machine likes to lift itself when you get a little, just a tiny bit aggressive on the controls. Okay, right there we're just going to pull back. And these holes are going to be close together. We're actually going to work on breaking and shattering some of that concrete. The goal in a situation overall, I should probably talk about that. Overall, my goal out here is to break it into chunks about like Rick has in his bucket there. I don't need to pulverize this concrete. In fact, that takes significantly longer to pull if you pulverize it. But we do want to pulverize the first little spot where Rick is going to start because he needs to be able to get his bucket in there. So we are going to get pretty close and tight with these holes that we poke in here. Whoop. Every once in a while you pull yourself off the ground a little bit. It's all right. That's you don't want to lift your ass way up in the air. It's kind of similar to pulling stumps. You're going to get banged around a little bit, but you don't want to do it way up in the air. So all I'm doing is I'm just working this section right here, and I'm really pulverizing this concrete. And what I'm really doing, because I have my hammer that I'm going to be exposing this hole with, is right there. I'm making sure I get this concrete to the point where I can easily manipulate it without putting a ton of stress on my hammer. And that way we can start to open up this hole. And we're just going to pop these chunks out. And I will tell you, as we talked about in our beginner video, you are not cranking on your hammer and on the shank with this concrete. That is the quickest way to absolutely destroy an attachment and cause yourself a ton of headache and possibly get yourself fired. All we're doing is moving stuff around. This right here is not hard on the tip. I mean, that tip is made for pounding concrete. So this right here is not doing anything to it. And you can see we are already starting to get a hole opened up for Rick. Now, if we wanted to break faster, if we had the time, and we needed to really pulverize this better, what we can do is we've now provided relief. We now have a way for the concrete to push out and away as we chop it. So what we can do now is, instead of going straight into it, we're actually going to have a little bit of an angle here, away into the hole. And that's going to push that concrete out into the hole. This is another one of the instances where I'm going to tell you, if you do it correctly, if your technique is sound, you can flex your tip just a little bit. Notice how shallow my tip is in there. My tip is only in there about 4 inches or so. I don't have a huge chunk of the shank down in there. What I'm going to do is, as I'm hammering, I'm going to rotate away from me. And what that's going to do is it's going to nudge that piece and kind of pry it. And I'm going to stress this. Be gentle. If you are really having to crank, you shouldn't be torquing on the hammer. It should take very minimal effort, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So I'm going to hammer, and then I'm going to start to rotate away from me. Let me get my engine spooled up. So hammer and rotate away, and you can see, look at that concrete moving away. We can actually push that concrete where we want it to go, assuming our technique is right. And right here, notice how it's not moving. Notice how I stopped cranking. I'm not pushing anymore because it doesn't have enough relief. So we're going to pound through. We're going to move over just a little bit. I'm going to set my angle back up. Rotate away. Rotate away. And you can see, I'm not going to do it a ton. I'm not going to keep going and force it because that's how you break things. But we can continue to set our angle, and we're going to work this whole chunk of concrete into that area where we have relief. And you can already see we've got stress fractures all over here. This piece is totally broken free. all I'm trying to do for the down and dirty, and of course it's not going to work for me, is I'm trying to work it out into that open area. But if Rick came over here and pulled this piece, it would pull right out for him. There you go. See it starting to work away now? And we've broken that whole piece free. And now, because it's already broken free, notice I'm not going to get in here and crank on it, but I can lift this out of here. I can manipulate it with the tip of my hammer, and I'm not worried about breaking anything. So that's how you're going to open up a hole. The other thing I'm going to talk about is, what if you have to break on an angle? So let's say this concrete here was actually stationary. I know it's going to move on me, but for the sake of our video, we're going to pretend that it's stationary. Remember, our goal with this whole thing is to hammer at a perpendicular angle to our surface. And so we may have to reposition the machine and reach out. We're going to uncurl, and we're going to get that hammer right there. I am perpendicular to the surface of that chunk of concrete, and I can move it as as it's mashing down right now. I'm manipulating my hammer to stay 90 degrees or perpendicular to my surface. And once I get pressure, enough pressure that I can put some down pressure on the hammer, we'll give it a pop. Now look at that. It's already starting to crumble. So we're going to get perpendicular. I had to shove down on my hammer. There you go. We have broken that piece to the point that Rick could pull it apart with his excavator. When you get control over this, and by the way, you might have a foot pedal down here. This could be one of your toggle switches. It just depends from machine to machine what runs your hydraulics. Once you get used to it, you can get to where you can do very controlled single pings. And so if we get into a delicate situation, like let's say I just want to break this little piece here into two, so we'll get set up on it, and then one pop. So okay, so that was 2 or 3, but still, you get the idea. So we're going to try this one more time. Push down. There you go. So you can get very precise. This doesn't have to be a brute force tool like most people think of it. You can get very precise with hammers, and you can do a lot of detail work with hammers. The other thing I want to talk about here is we've got saw cuts here in this corner. You don't ever want to start breaking right up against a saw cut. So our saw cut is actually right underneath my chisel tip right here. I would never start hammering right here, because what's going to happen with your initial hammer before any of these other holes exist? What's going to happen? Well, that concrete, as we push down into it, you've got a 4-inch diameter chunk of steel that's getting pushed down in that concrete. The concrete has to go somewhere. Some of it gets pushed down, but also a lot of it gets pushed and spread out. That's really what causes all of the stress fractures as we are breaking this concrete, is the fact that this shank is pushing its way in and pushing the concrete outwards, and just through brute force it is it's crunching up the concrete. If we do that right up against a saw cut, that means a ton of that concrete's going to get pushed with very, very high pressure into our saw cut. And so the way I do this is I'm going to come back here, and we're going to start working away from that saw cut. And you can see right now it's pushing that chunk into my saw cut. Now I'm not worried about it because we've already got a ton of relief here built in, but that is something, if I didn't have any relief built in, I'd back off of that right now. And I would start coming back here, and I'd start working back here. And again, we're creating relief. I'm worried about relieving the pressure up against that saw cut. And we'll treat it just like we did when we were making a hole for Rick. Except I don't have to peel the chunks out. All I need to do is pulverize a little bit of this and provide an area that concrete can push into instead of pushing against my saw cut. So we'll pulverize this just a little more. And again, I'm just recentering over my hammer with my adjustments right now. Okay, so we've got a nice hole of relief now, right? So we're gonna go here, and I'm gonna angle away from my saw cut just a little bit. And then once I start to bury the tip just a little, now we're gonna start to roll back towards us. And what we're doing is we're prying that piece out. And what that has allowed us to do is really pulverize this area in the corner to where when Rick goes to pull this, it's not going to destroy our edges. Nope. And you can see that hammer doesn't always sit down into place. Sometimes you gotta put a little pressure on it to get it to go all the way down before you engage. And we're just gonna continue to hammer, and we're creating that relief. And we're gonna do this all the way down the edge. So we have a saw cut running this whole edge, and I'm gonna do this the whole way down. Now here where we've already gone, I can get more aggressive. So as long as I know where that saw cut is and I don't overstep, I can get out here and I can start to get a little more aggressive. And see, it's already starting to pull free right into the open area. That's the way you're going to work a saw cut. And we'll just continue to do that all the way down, and we're going to leave Rick just a tiny little sliver that he's going to reach up with his teeth and grab. And that's how you protect a saw cut when you're doing this sort of work. So just like everything else in this industry, starts out really intimidating. Once you kind of get the hang of it, there's really not any magic to a hammer. It's just another part of the machine. It's another attachment you got to learn. It's really straightforward. So as always, I hope this has been helpful. Drop your questions and comments down below, and we'll catch you guys on the next Down and Dirty.